5 years after graduating from college, Marcus stood in the main conference room of New Foundations, looking out at the team of social workers, counselors, and program coordinators he had assembled. The organization had grown beyond his wildest dreams, now operating 6 residential facilities across Washington state and serving over 200 young people annually. The journey to this moment had not been easy. The first 2 years of running New Foundations had tested every ounce of determination Marcus possessed. Fundraising was a constant challenge. Regulatory hurdles seemed endless, and there were nights when he wondered if he had made the right choice in starting his own organization rather than working within existing systems. But the results spoke for themselves. New Foundations boasted an 85% success rate in helping youth achieve stable housing and either complete their education or secure stable employment within 2 years of entering the program. More importantly, 92% of their program graduates reported having at least one meaningful mentor relationship that continued beyond their time in residential services. Marcus had built the organization on the same principles that had saved his own life: unconditional support, high expectations, and the belief that every young person deserved not just to survive, but to discover their own potential to make a difference in the world. The program model was comprehensive, but personal. Each young person who entered New Foundations was matched with both a professional counselor and a volunteer mentor from the community. They received safe housing in small group homes, educational support ranging from GED preparation to college, scholarships, job training and placement assistance, and mental health services. But perhaps most importantly, they became part of a community that believed in their ability to succeed. Today's team meeting was special because Marcus was about to announce the organization's biggest expansion yet. After years of requests from other states and cities, New Foundations had received a major federal grant to replicate their model in 10 additional locations across the country. "We're not just growing for the sake of growth," Marcus explained to his staff. "We're expanding because there are thousands of young people out there who need what we offer, not just services, but genuine community and belief in their potential." After the meeting, Marcus drove to the place where it all began. Pastor Williams, now in his 70s but still actively leading the church, was in his office working on Sunday's sermon. Ruth, who had officially retired from cooking for the community meals but still showed up most days to help, was organizing donated school supplies for the after-school program. "Marcus," Ruth exclaimed, wrapping him in one of her famous hugs. "What brings you by today? Not that you need a reason, of course." Marcus smiled, feeling the same sense of home and safety he had experienced walking through these doors 15 years earlier. "I have some news to share with you both, and I wanted you to hear it first." Pastor Williams looked up from his sermon notes, immediately giving Marcus his full attention. Over the years, Marcus had continued to seek the pastor's wisdom on major decisions, valuing his perspective and experience. "The federal government has approved our expansion grant," Marcus announced. "But more than that, they've asked me to serve on a national task force on youth homelessness. I'll be helping to shape policy at the federal level while overseeing our expansion to new cities." Ruth clapped her hands together with joy. "Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful. Think of all the young people you'll be able to help." Pastor Williams stood up and embraced Marcus warmly. "I remember when you first told us you wanted to help other kids like yourself. Look how God has used your experiences and your heart to impact so many lives." The three of them sat together in Pastor Williams's office, and Marcus shared more details about the expansion. New Foundations would be opening locations in Detroit, Atlanta, Phoenix, and 7 other cities over the next 3 years. Each site would be staffed by local professionals but trained in the New Foundations model, ensuring consistency while allowing for community-specific adaptations. "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what happens to our work when we're no longer able to do it ourselves. I want to establish an endowment fund, and I'd like to name it after you both." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, that's incredibly generous, but you don't need to." "Yes, I do," Marcus interrupted gently. "The Williams Family Foundation for Youth Development. Everything I've accomplished, Every life New Foundations has touched. It all started with the kindness you showed a scared kid on a rainy night. Your names should be on this work. 3 months later, the Williams Family Foundation was officially launched at a gala fundraising event that brought together politicians, business leaders, and community advocates from across the Pacific Northwest. But the guests Marcus was most proud to have, there were the young people. Dozens of New Foundations graduates who had gone on to college, started families, launched careers, and begun giving back to their own communities. During his keynote address that evening, Marcus told the story that had become his signature speech. He spoke about the night he met Pastor Williams in the alley, about the hot chocolate that represented his first taste of unconditional kindness in months, about the blue door with the white cross that had opened to reveal not just shelter, but a family and a future he had never dared to imagine. 15 years ago, I was a 12-year-old boy who had given up hope, he said to the packed ballroom. I believed that nobody cared whether I lived or died, and I was preparing to disappear into the statistics of youth who age out of systems without support. But one man saw me not as a problem to be solved, but as a human being worthy of love and investment. Marcus paused, finding Pastor Williams and Ruth in the crowd. They sat at the head table, beaming with pride. Pastor Williams and Ruth didn't just save my life that night. They showed me what it meant to be part of a community, to be believed in, and to believe in myself. More than that, they taught me that kindness isn't just something we receive, it's something we're called to pass on. He gestured toward the young people scattered throughout the audience, many of whom were New Foundations graduates. Every young person our organization has served, every policy change we've influenced, every community that has embraced our model, it all traces back to that moment when a pastor chose to see potential instead of problems, hope instead of hopelessness. The evening raised over $2.3 million for the foundation, but more importantly, it created a network of supporters and advocates who would help sustain the work for years to come. 6 months later, Marcus received a call that would bring his journey full circle in the most unexpected way. A social worker from Child Protective Services contacted him about a situation that required his personal attention. We have a 12-year-old boy, the social worker explained. He's been through 4 foster placements in the past year, and he's run away from each one. We found him sleeping behind a restaurant downtown last night. He's angry, scared, and he won't talk to any of our staff. But when we mentioned your name and told him about New Foundations, he said he might be willing to meet with you. Marcus cleared his schedule immediately and drove to the CPS office. In a small meeting room, he found a boy who looked heartbreakingly familiar, thin, defensive, with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. The boy's name was Jerome, and his story was achingly similar to Marcus's own. They said you used to be like me, Jerome said quietly, not making eye contact. I was exactly like you, Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from him. Scared, angry, convinced that nobody understood what I was going through. I slept in an alley not far from here when I was your age. For the first time, Jerome looked up, his eyes searching Marcus's face for signs of deception or pity. What happened to you? Jerome asked. Marcus smiled, thinking of Pastor Williams and the cup of hot chocolate that had started it all. Someone showed me kindness when I needed it most, he said simply. And then they taught me that I had value, that I had potential, and that I could use my experiences to help other people. Just like I'm hoping to help you. Over the next several hours, Marcus shared his story with Jerome, watching as the boys' defensive walls slowly began to lower. By the end of their conversation, Jerome had agreed to visit New Foundations and meet some of the other young people in the program. As Marcus drove Jerome to the residential facility, he thought about the miraculous circle his life had traced. From a frightened boy seeking shelter to a man providing shelter for others. From someone who had lost hope to someone whose job was restoring hope in others. When they pulled up to the New Foundations house, Jerome looked up at the welcoming building with its bright blue door and turned to Marcus. Do you really think I can make it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus remembered asking Pastor Williams almost the same question 15 years earlier. He reached over and placed a gentle hand on Jerome's shoulder. "I don't just think you can make it," Marcus said, with complete conviction. "I believe you're going to do extraordinary things, and when you do, you'll help the next kid who needs to believe in themselves." As they walked toward the blue door together, Marcus felt the presence of Pastor Williams, and college life proved to be everything Marcus had hoped for and more. At the University of Washington, he threw himself into his studies with the same determination that had carried him through high school. His professors quickly recognized his unique perspective and practical experience in social work scenarios, often calling on him to share insights that textbook knowledge alone couldn't provide. Marcus's schedule was demanding but fulfilling. 3 days a week, he attended classes, on campus studying everything from child development psychology to policy analysis and community organization strategies. The other days, he continued working at the church, applying his new academic knowledge to real-world situations and using his practical experience to better understand his coursework. During his sophomore year, Marcus launched a research project that would become his senior thesis and the foundation for his future career. Working with his faculty advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen, he began studying the long-term outcomes for youth who aged out of foster care versus those who found stable, supportive community connections like he had experienced. "Your perspective is invaluable," Dr. Chen told him during one of their weekly meetings. "You're not just studying this population from the outside. You understand the system failures and the intervention points in ways that most researchers never could." Marcus spent months interviewing young adults who had experienced various pathways out of homelessness and foster care. He tracked their educational achievements, employment stability, mental health outcomes, and overall life satisfaction. The data confirmed what he had long suspected, that long-term unconditional support made an enormous difference in breaking cycles of poverty and instability. His research caught the attention of several nonprofit organizations and policymakers in the Seattle area. Marcus was invited to present his findings at conferences and community forums, where his combination of academic rigor and personal authenticity made him a compelling speaker. One of these presentations led to an unexpected opportunity. Dr. Amanda Foster, the director of the Washington State Department of Children and Family Services, approached Marcus after his presentation at a statewide child welfare conference. "I've been following your work," she told him. "We're developing a pilot program for transitional housing and support services for youth aging out of foster care, and we need someone with your background and perspective to help design it. Would you be interested in consulting with us?" Marcus was amazed that someone of Dr. Foster's stature would value his input, but he quickly agreed. Over the following months, he worked with state officials to develop a comprehensive program that would provide not just temporary housing, but educational support, job training, mental health services, and long-term mentorship for young people transitioning to independence. The pilot program, which they named Bridge to Tomorrow, launched in 3 counties during Marcus's junior year. He split his time between his regular college and church responsibilities and traveling around the state to help implement and evaluate the new program. Watching the first young people move into stable housing and begin building independent lives gave Marcus a sense of purpose that confirmed he was on the right path. At the church, Pastor Williams and Ruth watched Marcus's growing influence with pride and amazement. He had become a local expert on youth homelessness and foster care issues, but he never let his growing reputation change his commitment to their day-to-day community work. "Sometimes I have to remind myself that you're still the same scared boy who showed up at our door 7 years ago," Ruth confided to him one evening as they prepared meals for their weekly food pantry. "You've accomplished so much, but you've never forgotten where you came from or who helped you get here." Marcus smiled, stirring a large pot of soup. "How could I forget? Everything I've learned about helping people, I learned right here. All I'm doing now is trying to scale up what you and Pastor Williams have been doing for years." During his senior year, Marcus faced another major decision. Several graduate schools had expressed interest in having him continue his education, offering him opportunities to pursue a master's degree in social work or public policy. At the same time, Dr. Foster had offered him a full-time position with the state, leading the expansion of the Bridge to Tomorrow program statewide. There was also a third option that had been growing in Marcus's mind for months. He wanted to start his own organization, building on his research and experience to create a comprehensive model for supporting homeless and at-risk youth. The idea excited him, but it also felt overwhelming and risky. During spring break of his senior year, Marcus took a trip that would help clarify his direction. He visited New York City, where he had arranged to meet with directors of several established nonprofits serving homeless youth. He wanted to learn from their successes and failures, and to understand how his ideas might fit into the larger landscape of social services. One meeting stood out above all others. Marcus sat in a coffee shop near Columbia University with David Martinez, who had founded a successful organization 15 years earlier after his own experience with homelessness as a teenager. "Starting a nonprofit is the hardest thing I've ever done," David told him honestly. "The paperwork, the fundraising, the constant struggle to prove your worth to donors and government agencies, it's exhausting. But it's also the most rewarding work imaginable when you see lives being changed." David leaned forward, his expression serious. "The question you have to ask yourself is this: do you want to work within existing systems to make them better, or do you want to create something entirely new? Both are important, but they require different skills and different sacrifices." Marcus spent the rest of his New York trip thinking about David's question. He visited homeless shelters, talked with social workers and policy advocates, and observed programs in action. By the time he boarded his flight back to Seattle, he knew what he wanted to do. 3 weeks before graduation, Marcus made his announcement at the church's weekly community meeting. The main hall was packed with people who had watched him grow up, including several of the youth he had mentored over the years. "I've decided to turn down the graduate school acceptances and the state job offer," he began, noting the surprised looks on several faces. "Instead, I'm going to start my own organization. I want to create something that combines the best practices I've researched with the kind of personal, long-term commitment that saved my life right here in this room." He outlined his vision for New Foundations, a nonprofit that would provide not just temporary assistance but comprehensive long-term support for homeless and at-risk youth. The organization would offer housing, education support, job training, mental health services, and most importantly, ongoing mentorship and community connection. "I don't want to just help kids survive their circumstances," Marcus explained. "I want to help them thrive and become leaders who can help others do the same." Pastor Williams stood up from his seat in the front row, tears in his eyes. "7 years ago, God brought a frightened boy to our door. Tonight, I see a man with a vision that could change countless lives. Ruth and I couldn't be more proud of who you've become." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt the overwhelming support of the community that had raised him. As people approached him afterward with offers to volunteer, donate, and spread the word about his new venture, Marcus realized that his journey from homeless child to nonprofit founder was really just beginning. The scared boy who had knocked on a church door in the rain was about to become the founder of an organization that would provide that same kind of life-saving door for hundreds of other young people. 6 years had transformed Marcus from a frightened 12-year-old into a confident high school senior. The legal guardianship process had been completed when he was 13, making Pastor Williams and Ruth his official family. The church had become more than just his home. It was the foundation of everything he had built his new life upon. Marcus had excelled academically throughout high school. His grades placed him in the top 10% of his graduating class, and he had become a leader in several student organizations. He was president of the school's community service club, a peer tutor for struggling students, and had won several awards for his essays about social justice and community involvement. The creative writing club that Mrs. Rodriguez had suggested in middle school had become one of Marcus's greatest passions. He had won the state high school writing competition twice, once for a personal narrative about homelessness, and once for a short story about the power of unexpected kindness. His writing was powerful and authentic, drawing from his own experiences, while offering hope and insight to readers. College acceptance letters had begun arriving in March, and Marcus faced the enviable problem of choosing between several excellent offers. He had been accepted to the University of Washington with a partial scholarship, Seattle University with nearly full financial aid, and even received an acceptance letter from Columbia University in New York, though the financial package there would require significant loans. Pastor Williams and Ruth were immensely proud but tried not to influence his decision too heavily. They wanted Marcus to choose the path that felt right to him, even if it meant leaving Seattle and the community that had raised him. "Whatever you choose, we'll support you," Ruth assured him one evening as they reviewed the acceptance letters together. "You've worked so hard for this opportunity. The whole world is open to you now." Marcus had decided to major in social work, with a minor in psychology, staying true to the goal he had announced at that community meeting years earlier. He wanted to work with at-risk youth and families, helping them navigate the systems that had once failed him so completely. During his senior year, Marcus had also taken on more responsibilities at the church. He helped coordinate the after-school program, trained new volunteers, and had even begun leading some of the community meetings when Pastor Williams was away. The community looked up to him as an example of what was possible with the right support and determination. One of Marcus's favorite initiatives was a mentorship program he had started for homeless and at-risk youth in the area. He partnered with local schools and social services to identify kids who were struggling, and then connected them with volunteers from the church community who could provide guidance and support. The program had helped dozens of young people over the past 2 years, and Marcus felt deep satisfaction knowing he was passing on the gift he had received. "You've become quite the leader," Pastor Williams observed one afternoon, as he watched Marcus facilitate a training session for new mentors. "I remember when you were so afraid to speak up in our community meetings. Now look at you, inspiring and teaching others." Marcus smiled, thinking about how much he had changed. "I learned from the best," he replied. "Everything I know about leadership and service I learned by watching you and Ruth." As graduation approached, Marcus made his college decision. He chose the University of Washington, wanting to stay close to the community and family that had given him everything. He would commute from the church for his first year, helping with programs and maintaining his connection to the place that had saved his life. The graduation ceremony was an emotional event for the entire church community. Pastor Williams and Ruth sat in the front row beaming with pride as Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma. Many members of their church family had come to watch, holding signs and cheering loudly when his name was called. During his valedictorian speech, Marcus chose to focus on the theme of second chances and the power of community support. He spoke about how one act of kindness on a rainy night had changed the trajectory of his entire life, and how every person in the audience had the power to be someone else's turning point. "6 years ago, I was sleeping in an alley, cold and hungry and convinced that nobody cared whether I lived or died," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. "Today I stand before you as proof that love and kindness can overcome any obstacle. But more importantly, I stand before you as someone committed to ensuring that other young people don't have to face their challenges alone." After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the church. The entire community had gathered to honor Marcus's achievement, and the fellowship hall was decorated with balloons and banners congratulating their first college graduate. The food tables were loaded with everyone's favorite dishes, and there was even a cake shaped like a graduation. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself in the same garden where Pastor Williams had first offered to become his legal guardian. Ruth joined them on the bench, and the three sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I have something I want to tell you both," Marcus said finally. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next, and I know what I want to do after college." Pastor Williams and Ruth waited patiently for him to continue. "I want to come back here and work alongside you," Marcus continued. "I want to expand our programs, maybe start a nonprofit that can help even more families. I want to build something that ensures no kid has to sleep in an alley because they have nowhere else to go." Ruth reached over and took his hand. "That sounds like a wonderful plan, sweetheart. But don't feel like you have to limit yourself to what we've already built here. Dream bigger than that." "I am dreaming big," Marcus replied with a grin. "I want to create a model that can be replicated in other communities, I want to train other people to do what you've done for me. I want to change the whole system so that every child has someone who believes in them." Pastor Williams nodded, thoughtfully. "Now that," he said, "sounds like a calling worthy of the remarkable young man you've become." As they sat together under the stars, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The frightened boy who had knocked on their door 6 years ago was gone, replaced by a young man with dreams, goals, and the tools to achieve them. But more than that, he was a young man who understood the profound responsibility that came with the gifts he had been given. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, he was exactly where he belonged, surrounded by the love of family and the promise of a future built on service to others. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first knocked on the church door, and his life had taken on a routine he never thought possible. Every morning, he woke up in his small but comfortable room, helped Ruth prepare breakfast for the community, and then walked to Franklin Middle School with a backpack full of supplies that Pastor Williams had somehow managed to acquire. Getting Marcus enrolled in school had been Pastor Williams's first priority. The pastor had spent hours on the phone with school administrators, social workers, and legal aid attorneys, navigating the complex system to ensure Marcus could attend classes legally. When the paperwork was finally completed, Pastor Williams had driven Marcus to the school personally and walked him to his first class. "Education is the key that unlocks every door," Pastor Williams had told him that first morning. "No matter what happens in life, knowledge is something no one can ever take away from you." School was challenging for Marcus at first. He had missed so much time that he was behind in most subjects, especially math and reading. His teachers were understanding but concerned about his ability to catch up before the end of the school year. Marcus felt embarrassed when he struggled with problems that seemed easy for his classmates, but he refused to give up. Every afternoon when he returned to the church, Ruth would sit with him at the kitchen table and help him with his homework. She had been a teacher herself before marrying Pastor Williams, and she had a patient way of explaining difficult concepts that made them seem less overwhelming. "Everyone learns at their own pace," she would remind him when he got frustrated. "The important thing is that you keep trying. I can see how hard you're working, and I'm proud of you for not giving up." Pastor Williams also made sure Marcus had responsibilities around the church that helped him feel like a contributing member of their community, rather than just someone receiving charity. Marcus helped serve meals during their twice-weekly food pantry, assisted with cleaning and maintenance tasks, and even began helping to sort donations of clothing and household items. One of Marcus's favorite jobs was helping with the children who came to the after-school program. Many of them came from difficult situations similar to his own, and he found that he could relate to their struggles in ways that the adult volunteers sometimes couldn't. He helped them with homework, played games with them, and listened when they needed someone to talk to. "You have a gift with those kids," Pastor Williams observed one afternoon, as he watched Marcus patiently teach a 7-year-old how to tie his shoes. "They trust you because they can see that you understand what they're going through." Marcus felt a warm pride in his chest at the pastor's words. For so long, he had felt like his difficult experiences were just painful memories he wanted to forget. Now he was beginning to see that those experiences could actually help him connect with and support others who were struggling. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus's grades began to improve steadily. His English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was particularly encouraging. She had noticed his improvement in reading comprehension and his thoughtful contributions to class discussions about the books they were studying. "Marcus has such insight into character motivation and conflict," she told Pastor Williams during a parent-teacher conference that spring. "I think he understands human nature and resilience in ways that are quite mature for his age. He should consider joining our creative writing club next year." The idea of writing appealed to Marcus. He had always been observant, watching people and trying to understand their stories. Living at the church had introduced him to so many different types of people, each with their own journey of struggle and hope. He began keeping a journal, writing down thoughts and observations about the people he met. One evening during their community meeting, Pastor Williams asked if anyone had a goal they wanted to share with the group. Marcus surprised himself by raising his hand. "I want to go to college someday," he said, his voice stronger than it had been when he first arrived. I want to study social work or maybe psychology. I want to help people like you've helped me." The room erupted in supportive applause, and Marcus felt his cheeks warm with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. Pastor Williams beamed at him from across the circle. "That's a wonderful goal, Marcus, and I have no doubt you'll achieve it. You've already shown more determination and heart than many adults I know." That night, Pastor Williams knocked on Marcus's door and asked if they could talk privately. They walked out to the small garden behind the church, where Ruth grew vegetables that helped feed their community meals. "I've been thinking about your future," Pastor Williams began, settling onto a wooden bench. "You've been with us for almost 6 months now, and you've shown incredible growth. Your grades are good. You're a leader with the younger kids, and you've become an important part of our community here." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety in his stomach. Was Pastor Williams about to tell him it was time to move on? "I want you to know that you always have a home here," the pastor continued, as if reading his thoughts. "Ruth and I have talked about it extensively, and we'd like to discuss the possibility of you staying with us permanently. We could look into the legal steps needed to become your guardians, if that's something you'd want." Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. In all the foster homes and temporary placements he had experienced, no one had ever offered him a permanent place in their family. No one had ever wanted to keep him. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Pastor Williams smiled and placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Because you're already our son in every way that matters. You've brought so much joy and purpose to our lives. Ruth and I never had children of our own, and we've come to love you as if you were born to us." Marcus couldn't hold back his tears any longer. For the first time in his young life, he felt truly wanted and loved unconditionally. He threw his arms around Pastor Williams, who hugged him back with the fierce protective love of a true father. "Does this mean I can really stay?" Marcus asked through his tears. "As long as you want to," Pastor Williams assured him. "This is your home now, son. Forever." The warmth inside the church hit Marcus like a gentle embrace. The main hall was simple but welcoming, with wooden pews arranged in neat rows and colorful stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns on the floor even in the early morning light. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air, making his empty stomach clench with hunger. Pastor Williams led him to a small kitchen area behind the altar, where a woman with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around her eyes was preparing breakfast. She looked up as they entered, and her face immediately softened when she saw Marcus. "This must be our young visitor," she said warmly, setting down her spatula. "I'm Ruth Williams, the pastor's wife, and you look like you could use a good meal, and maybe some dry clothes." Marcus nodded silently, still overwhelmed by the kindness these strangers were showing him. Ruth didn't press him for information or ask uncomfortable questions. Instead, she simply guided him to a small bathroom where she had laid out clean towels, soap, and a set of clothes that looked about his size. "Take your time, honey," she said gently. "When you're ready, breakfast will be waiting." The hot shower was a luxury Marcus had almost forgotten. As the warm water washed away weeks of grime and exhaustion, he found himself crying for the first time in months. Not from sadness, but from relief. For 20 minutes, he was safe, warm, and cared for. When he emerged, wearing clothes that actually fit and smelled like fabric softener, Ruth had prepared a plate that made his eyes widen. Scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, toast with real butter, and fresh orange juice. It was more food than he had seen in one place since leaving his grandmother's house. "Eat up," Pastor Williams encouraged, settling into the chair across from him. "There's plenty more where that came from." As Marcus ate, the pastor and his wife shared stories about their church and community. They talked about the food pantry they ran twice a week, the after-school program for local kids, and the shelter they provided for anyone who needed a safe place to sleep. They spoke of their work with such passion and love that Marcus began to understand this wasn't just a job for them, it was their calling. "We've been running this place for 15 years, Ruth explained, refilling his orange juice glass. "James felt called to serve this community when we moved here from Georgia. We've seen a lot of people come through these doors, each with their own story, their own struggles. Pastor Williams nodded, his eyes focused on Marcus with genuine interest. Everyone who comes here is family, that's how we see it. Some stay for a meal, some for a night, others for longer. Whatever someone needs, we try our best to provide it. After breakfast, they showed Marcus around the rest of the church. There was a small library filled with donated books, a recreation room with games and comfortable chairs, and several simple bedrooms upstairs for people who needed temporary housing. Everything was clean and well-maintained, clearly cared for by people who took pride in their work. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," Pastor Williams told him as they sat in the recreation room. "But I do have a few simple rules. No drugs or alcohol. Everyone helps with daily chores. And we ask that you attend our evening community meetings. They're not religious services, just time for everyone staying here to check in with each other, share their day, maybe their concerns, or victories." Marcus found his voice again. "What if I can't pay you back?" Ruth reached over and patted his hand gently. "Kindness isn't a loan, sweetheart. It's a gift. The only thing we ask is that someday, when you're able, you pass that kindness on to someone else who needs it." That afternoon, Marcus met the other people staying at the church. There was Maria, a single mother with 2 young children who was saving money for an apartment after losing her job. Tom, an elderly veteran dealing with medical bills that had cost him his home. Jennifer, a teenager who had aged out of foster. Karen was working 2 jobs while finishing high school. Each person had a story, and each was being helped without judgment or conditions. Marcus watched how Pastor Williams and Ruth treated everyone with the same respect and dignity, regardless of their circumstances. They remembered details about each person's life, asked about job interviews and doctor appointments, celebrated small victories, and offered comfort during setbacks. As evening approached, the community gathered in the main hall for their daily meeting. It wasn't formal or stuffy. People sat wherever they were comfortable, some on chairs, others on the floor. Pastor Williams opened the meeting by asking if anyone wanted to share something positive from their day. Marcus listened as Maria talked. About finding a promising job listing, Tom shared that his disability benefits had finally been approved, and Jennifer mentioned that her algebra teacher had praised her improvement in class. When it was his turn, Marcus felt nervous but safe enough to speak. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "This is my first day here. I just wanted to say thank you for the food and the warm bed. I haven't felt this safe in a long time." The group responded, with gentle applause and welcoming smiles. Several people came up to him afterward to introduce themselves properly and offer encouragement. For the first time in months, Marcus felt like he belonged somewhere. That night, lying in a real bed, with clean sheets and a warm blanket, Marcus stared at the ceiling and thought about the day. These people barely knew him, yet they had fed him, clothed him, and given him shelter without asking for anything in return. Pastor Williams and Ruth had shown him a kind of love he had never experienced, unconditional, patient, and genuine. He drifted off to sleep. Marcus made a silent promise to himself. Somehow, someday, he would find a way to repay this kindness. He didn't know how or when, but he knew he would never forget the blue door with the white cross and the people who had saved his life. The winter rain fell heavy on the cracked pavement of downtown Seattle. Marcus Johnson, barely 12 years old, pressed himself deeper into the narrow alley between 2 brick buildings. His thin jacket, torn at the shoulders, did little to protect him from the biting cold. The cardboard he had found earlier was now soggy beneath him, and his stomach growled loudly in the silence of the night. Marcus had been living on the streets for 3 months now. After his mother lost her battle with addiction and his grandmother could no longer care for him, the foster system had failed him too. He had run away from his 3rd placement after enduring abuse that no child should ever face. The streets were dangerous, but they felt safer than the last house he had called home. As he shivered in the darkness, Marcus heard footsteps approaching. His heart raced and he prepared to run. Street life had taught him that strangers often meant trouble, but instead of the heavy boots of security guards or police officers, he saw a pair of worn sneakers stop right at the entrance to his hiding spot. "Hey there, son," came a gentle voice. Marcus looked up to see a middle-aged African-American man with kind eyes and graying hair at his temples. The man wore a simple brown coat and carried a steaming cup in his hands. "I'm Pastor Williams from the community church down the street. I saw you ducking in here earlier. You must be freezing." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. But something about the man's voice, the way he crouched down to Marcus's eye level instead of towering over him, felt different. "I'm not here to cause any trouble," Pastor Williams continued softly. "I just thought you might be hungry. There's a warm meal waiting at the church if you want it. No questions asked, no strings attached." He extended the cup toward Marcus. "Hot chocolate. My wife made it fresh." The sweet aroma filled Marcus's nostrils and his resolve began to crack. When was the last time someone had offered him something without expecting anything in return? He couldn't remember. Pastor Williams noticed the boy's hesitation and set the cup down gently beside him. "I'll leave this here for you. The church is just 2 blocks that way." He pointed down the street. "Blue door with a white cross. We're open all night for folks who need a safe place." As the pastor began to walk away, Marcus found his voice for the first time in days. "Why?" he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Pastor Williams turned back with a sad but understanding smile. "Because everyone deserves kindness, especially when they need it most. God puts people in our path for a reason, son. Maybe you're in mine tonight." With that, he disappeared into the rainy night, leaving Marcus alone with the warm cup and a decision that would change his life forever. The hot chocolate was the best thing he had tasted in months, and as he sipped it slowly to make it last, Marcus found himself staring in the direction of the blue door with the white cross. For the first time in 3 months, Marcus felt something he had almost forgotten existed: hope. The rain continued to fall, but somehow it didn't feel as cold anymore. The pastor's words echoed in his mind as he finished the last drops of chocolate. Maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. As dawn approached, Marcus made a choice that would alter the course of his entire future. Clutching the empty cup like a lifeline, he stood up on unsteady legs and began walking toward the church. Each step felt heavy with uncertainty, but also light with possibility. The blue door came into view just as the first rays of sunlight broke through the cloudy Seattle sky. Marcus stood before it for several minutes, his hand raised to knock, gathering the courage to accept the kindness of a stranger who had seen him not as a problem to be solved, but as a human being worthy of compassion. When he finally knocked, Pastor Williams himself answered the door, as if he had been waiting all night. The smile that spread across the pastor's face was warm enough to melt away months of fear and loneliness. "Welcome home, son," Pastor Williams said, opening the door wide. "We've been waiting for you."